I am speaking with State Senator Bruce Tarr, as I do every week. And Bruce, I understand that 1623 Studios was the first to call your race on election night.
You know, I was so honored by that. I don't think I've ever had my race called live by anybody in the broadcast media. So, Heather, it was an honor. And, you know, after all these years in public service, it's nice to still be able to have a first. And
Right?
that was the first. And so, what I wanted to do was transmit that to the whole world and say, my race has been called by a major network.
Well, I commended the whole team at 1623 Studios, not just for calling your race and having the wherewithal to do that, but to cover our local scene in an exciting way. This was really important news, a lot of important local news happening, and they were there to cover it.
I agree. And I was so happy to see the coverage be able to continue during the era of the pandemic when so many things have been disrupted.
Right.
And I know it had to be different. It couldn't be the same that it usually is. And, you know, we were talking off air a little bit about how usually when you go to City Hall, there'd be a large group of people anxiously awaiting results and tabulating on their own notepads and things. And that couldn't be the case this year. So it was a very, very different scenario. But I was so happy that the coverage continued, because it was even more important because we couldn't all be there to have
Exactly.
some way to access what was going on.
Right, right. And the Gloucester Times, we collaborated with them and their reporters were there. It was really good, really good. And also Erica Brown from the Manchester Cricket. She was part of the collaboration. Well, so let's get to Beacon Hill. I understand there's some budget news.
There's a lot happening on Beacon Hill right now. It's been one of the most active days that I've seen in quite a while, and it all centers around the budget. So in order to close the books for Massachusetts, we have to do one remaining supplementary budget. It's called a closeout sup, and basically it accounts for all the money that's left after we ended the fiscal year. And of course, the fiscal year ended for 2020. It ended on July 1. And the comptroller needs us to pass this legislation to be able to do basically a final reconciliation. Think of it sort of like reconciling your checkbook. And we have to do it for the end of the fiscal year. And that bill will consist of hundreds of millions of dollars. And it is now on the table. The House is going to take it up today. And they've got about 40 amendments. So they're going to have a budget debate. We're waiting for it. My sense is that we won't get it in time today to take it up, so we'll probably take it up tomorrow. But it is important that we get it done, because there are things in it that are time sensitive. Number one, the comptroller has to be able to close the books and do the reconciliation. But number two, there's an eligibility change relative to PUA, the unemployment assistance for folks that are independent contractors and the like. And if we don't get it done, we have to notify them of an ineligibility that many of them will have. So we're trying to get it done in time that we don't have to send that and then revoke it just a week later. So I think we'll get it done by tomorrow. That's going pretty well. And the House will have a vigorous debate. And then an even bigger budgetary exercise is underway in the House as well, where today they filed their version of the fiscal year 2021 budget. So for the fiscal year we're currently in. And it differs a little bit, but not in a tremendous way from what the governor had filed. It uses the same revenue shortfall number, and it adds about $200 or $300 million to spending, and takes a little bit bigger withdrawal from the stabilization fund of about $1.55 billion. If that budget were to pass, we'd still have close to $2 billion in the stabilization fund, which we need for whatever is going to come our way for the remainder of this fiscal year and next fiscal year. So the two budgets, the governor's revised budget and the House proposed budget, in many ways track pretty closely. There are clearly differences, and I won't get into them now. But the even more interesting news is the House announced today that they're going to take that budget up and debate it at the end of next week. And so we anticipate that by close of business on Friday, the House will have passed a fiscal year 2021 budget. And then of course it comes to us, and we have already been engaged in the process of putting our budget together. So for instance, I've been meeting with our chair of Ways and Means, as have other members, and we're trying to put it together. We haven't waited to get it from the House. But the ball will be in our court after next week. And the hope is really to get a budget done by the end of November, and at the very latest by the end of the year.
Mm. And this, you had anticipated basically there not being grand differences because
Yes.
you need to get this passed, and everyone understands that. So ideology maybe aside a bit, right?
Absolutely. And, a great testament to Massachusetts is the fact that we have those conversations, and that we've had an agreement in principle that we wouldn't have budgets that have wide departures from each other, so that when each version was passed, it would be easier to reconcile them and then move them on to the governor's desk. And I think you're going to see that play out. And I'm really pleased by that. And I know I talk about it a lot, but I don't think it can be overemphasized that we have those agreements and things generally move forward in an orderly way. Not all the time. Once in a while, we depart from those general ways of operating. But for the most part, we work together. And I think you're going to see a budget emerge from the House that's very limited in terms of focusing primarily on spending and not on dramatic changes to public policy. And I think the Senate will follow suit.
Mm. So let's discuss the governor's new executive orders.
So we talked a little bit about the substance of them in our last conversation, and just to revisit some of the key elements. So one of them is a stay-at-home advisory from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. And certainly the nature of that advisory is flexible, so that if you need to get to work, if you happen to work an overnight shift, or if you need a necessity like food or medicine, it's not intended to be a lockdown, which is a term that so many people use. And I think it's used in many times inappropriately in many cases, but it's meant to try to keep us from moving about during those hours. It also, along the same lines, says that a restaurant can't serve food in indoor dining. It can do takeout, but it can't do indoor dining after 9:30 p.m. A liquor store can't sell liquor after 9:30 p.m. And it also does some other things, like suggesting that, or not suggesting, but requiring that we don't have gatherings in our homes of more than 10 people if we're inside, and that we wear masks whenever we're not in our homes. And so these are pretty significant changes. And I know that a lot of folks will be concerned about that. And I know that they are not necessarily what we all had expected, having gone through the first wave of the pandemic. But the numbers have been increasing in a dramatic way in terms of increased COVID cases. As we are taping this yesterday, we had a number that was over 1,600 new cases. And so I think it would be folly and irresponsible that in the face of that, to do nothing and not try to get out ahead of the increased wave of the pandemic. And that's exactly what's happening. Will it be easy? No. It will require us all to do things differently. But I think we all join together in the hope that we won't have to do more than this. And it will help to preserve the hospital capacity we need, reduce the number of cases that might otherwise have occurred, and prevent people from dying from this terrible virus.
Mm. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I would love to hear you comment again on in the foreseeable future, any sort of economic shutdown. Do you think the governor is thinking about that?
There is great concern on Beacon Hill in the administration and in the House and the Senate not to have any additional economic shutdowns, to try to avoid those to the greatest extent possible, which is again why you see some more intense things happening right now in terms of the orders that have been released, in order to try to avoid having greater economic impact in terms of shutting down businesses and things of that nature. I mean, we are definitely in a situation where businesses are struggling. And though our unemployment picture has improved, it's still very high. And we also have a situation where businesses are closing and they're still struggling to be able to make ends meet and to remain viable. So we want to try to avoid any more impacts on businesses, but hopefully we won't need to.
Okay, last question. How anxiously are you awaiting decisions in Washington?
Well, like the rest of the country, I'm watching. My hope, first and foremost, is that the election will come to a reasonable conclusion, and that we will all respect whatever that conclusion is. And then we will set ourselves to the task of working together as Americans to face the challenges that we face. The pandemic is one of them, trying to continue to rebuild the economy, which has had a heavy toll taken on it by the public health measures that we've had to do, and trying to address equality and issues of structural racism and things of that nature. So my hope is that the election will conclude in a way that everyone respects, and that we will take the results, and then we will move forward and realize the election is now over and that we need to move forward together. So I'm watching like everybody else. And again, I hope this isn't a situation where there's uncertainty for a long period of time, because I don't think that would be helpful.
No, not at all. Well, thank you so much for meeting us this busy week, and we will see you again next week.
Well, thank you. And again, let me say thanks for this opportunity, but let me also just reiterate my appreciation to 1623 Studios and your print partners that you mentioned, the Manchester Cricket, the Gloucester Daily Times. This kind of information that you help us to disseminate is critical in the times that we live in. So I know it's not easy, but thank you.
Well, thank you for taking the time, and we will see you soon.
Okay, thanks, Heather.
Bye.
Bye.